a story that will touch your heart. What would you do if life gave you a second chance at love? Emily never imagined that stepping in for her twin sister's wedding would change her fate forever. If this story moved you, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss tomorrow's special story. Another unforgettable tale is waiting for you. See you in the next one. Like, comment, and subscribe now. She hid her face on her wedding day, but he was determined to see the truth. Emily's unexpected fate. A family's betrayal. Emily Dawson never asked to be the black sheep of her family. At just 25 years old, she had spent most of her life hiding behind closed doors, away from the harsh whispers and judgmental stares. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when she was just like her twin sister, Isabella, beautiful, confident, and full of dreams. But that all changed on a tragic night, years ago, when a house fire left a deep scar running across the left side of her face. Instead of comforting her, Emily's parents saw her as a disgrace. The Dawsons were a wealthy, high-society family, obsessed with perfection. They had built their reputation on beauty, status, and power. In their eyes, Isabella was the perfect daughter, the glamorous model with a flawless face, the one who graced magazine covers and walked the most prestigious runways. Meanwhile, Emily, with her scarred face and quiet demeanor, was treated like an outcast, as if she didn't belong to them at all. She was locked away in the attic of their grand estate, a sprawling mansion with sparkling chandeliers and marble floors, yet no warmth. While Isabella traveled the world, attending fashion shows and luxurious parties, Emily was confined to a space barely larger than a storage room. She lived off scraps, sneaking whatever food the housemaid could spare, and only stepping out when absolutely necessary. One evening, as she sat curled up by the small attic window, staring at the city lights in the distance, the door suddenly burst open. Her mother's sharp voice echoed through the cramped space. "Emily, come downstairs. Now." Emily's heart pounded. It was rare for them to summon her. She hurriedly followed, her hands trembling as she stepped into the lavish living room. Her father sat in his leather chair, his expression cold, his eyes filled with disgust as he looked at her. Her mother sat beside him, tapping her manicured nails against the glass table. "We need you to do something for this family," her mother said, her voice dripping with forced politeness. Emily swallowed hard. "What is it?" Her father exhaled sharply. "You're going to take Isabella's place at her wedding." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What?" Her mother's eyes narrowed. "Isabella has an urgent modeling contract in Paris. She can't come back in time for the wedding. But this marriage must happen. The groom, Lucas Carter, is a billionaire, and our family's business depends on this alliance." Emily shook her head. "But I don't even know him." "He'll know I'm not Isabella." Her father scoffed. "You'll wear a veil. You'll stay silent. The contract will still have Isabella's name on it. Once she returns, we'll fix everything." Emily's hands clenched into fists. "This is wrong. What if he finds out?" Her mother's lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, he won't. Because if you refuse, you're out. No more food, no more shelter. You will have nothing." Emily felt her stomach tighten. She had no choice. Trapped between the cruelty of her own family and the unknown fate that awaited her, she took a deep breath. "I'll do it." Emily's wedding of deception, a shocking twist. Emily could barely feel her legs as she stood at the entrance of the grand wedding hall. The heavy silk gown clung to her skin, and the thick veil draped over her face made it difficult to breathe. Beneath it, her heart pounded violently against her ribs. This was really happening. She was about to marry a man she had never met, Lucas Carter, a billionaire who believed he was marrying her twin sister, Isabella. She swallowed hard, gripping the bouquet in her trembling hands. The music played, the guests whispered, and all eyes turned toward her. She could hear murmurs from the crowd. "She looks different, doesn't she?" One woman whispered. "Maybe she's just nervous," another replied. Emily forced herself to take slow, steady steps down the aisle, each one feeling heavier than the last. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind, "Do not let him see your face. Do not mess this up. If you do, you'll regret it." At the altar stood Lucas Carter, the man she had only seen in magazines. He was tall, powerful, and devastatingly handsome. His sharp blue eyes locked onto her, unreadable, as she approached. Despite her fear, she could tell one thing: he was studying her, as if sensing something was off. The ceremony began. Emily kept her head down, barely registering the words of the officiant. Her hands felt ice-cold as Lucas slid the wedding ring onto her finger. And then, the moment she dreaded came. "You may now kiss the bride." Her stomach twisted. She took a small step back, instinctively retreating. Lucas frowned. "Baby, let me see you," he said, his deep voice filled with a mix of confusion and amusement. Panic surged through her veins. But before she could react, Lucas gently reached up and pulled back the veil. Gasps filled the room. The whispers turned into sharp, audible shocks. "What the?" someone muttered. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She saw Lucas's face shift from confusion to something unreadable. The amusement in his eyes vanished, replaced by something darker, something intense. For what felt like an eternity, the entire room held its breath. And then, without a word, Lucas cupped her face with both hands and kissed her. A wave of stunned silence washed over the crowd. Emily's mind went blank. She expected disgust, rejection, anger. But instead, he was kissing her. In front of everyone. His lips were firm, warm, real. When he pulled back, he looked straight into her wide, terrified eyes. His voice was low, just for her. "You're not Isabella, are you?" Emily felt her entire world tilt. The secret was out. Love and deception, a truth uncovered. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. Lucas's words sent a cold shiver down her spine. "He knows." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The grand wedding hall felt like it was closing in on her, the weight of hundreds of judging eyes pressing against her skin. She could see the confusion, the tension crackling in the air. Her parents sat stiffly in their seats, their expressions unreadable, but their eyes screamed, "Stay silent." Lucas's grip on her wrist tightened just slightly, enough to keep her from running. His blue eyes locked onto hers, searching, demanding an answer. "Say something," he murmured, his voice controlled but sharp. Emily swallowed hard. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "You'll regret it if you mess this up." She hesitated, the lump in her throat making it almost impossible to speak. "I am Isabella." It was a lie. A pathetic, desperate attempt to save herself from the storm that was about to break. Lucas's jaw clenched. His gaze hardened. For a moment, Emily thought he would expose her right then and there in front of the entire elite society. But instead, he let out a quiet chuckle, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Is that so?" he whispered, his voice dripping with something dangerous. Before she could react, he turned to the officiant. "Let's continue." Emily's stomach twisted as the ceremony resumed, but something was different now. Lucas was no longer the charming, confident groom he had been moments ago. He was watching her, analyzing her every move. The reception was a blur. Music played, guests laughed, champagne flowed, but Emily felt like she was drowning. Lucas never left her side, yet he barely spoke to her. Every time she shifted, he was there, his piercing gaze burning into her skin. Finally, as the evening wound down, Lucas leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Let's go home, wife," he said, his voice laced with something she couldn't quite name. Emily stiffened but nodded. She had no choice. The ride to his estate was silent. The city lights flickered past the tinted windows, but Emily couldn't focus. Her mind was racing. What was he going to do? Would he expose her? Send her back to her family in disgrace? When they arrived at his massive penthouse, Lucas led her inside, shutting the door behind them. The moment they were alone, he turned to face her. "Take off the veil," he ordered. Emily's hands shook. Slowly, she pulled the delicate fabric away, revealing her full face under the soft glow of the chandelier. Lucas stared, his expression unreadable. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "Who are you really?" And this time, she knew, there was no escaping the truth. A battle of truth and betrayal. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. She could feel the weight of Lucas's stare, his piercing blue eyes demanding the truth. There was no more running, no more hiding. Her voice cracked, and she took a shaky breath. "I'm not Isabella." Lucas's jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists at his sides. He exhaled sharply, as if forcing himself to stay calm. "I figured," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Now tell me why." Emily's throat burned with unshed tears. "Because I had no choice," she whispered. "My parents forced me. They said the wedding had to happen, that if I didn't do this, they'd throw me out." Lucas let out a humorless chuckle, shaking his head. "And you just went along with it?" His voice was sharp, but there was something else beneath it, something deeper. Emily bit her lip, her hands trembling. "You don't understand what it's like growing up in that house," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They treated me like I didn't exist, like I was some kind of shame to them. I was locked away for years, hidden from the world. If I had refused, they would have taken everything from me. I had nowhere else to go." For a moment, Lucas said nothing. His expression softened just slightly, but it was gone in an instant. He turned away, pacing the length of the room before stopping abruptly. "So, what was the plan?" he asked coldly. "Play wife for a few weeks, then switch back like nothing happened?" Emily swallowed hard. "I don't know. They never told me how long I had to pretend." Lucas scoffed. "Of course not." The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Emily could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken thoughts running through his mind. Then, before either of them could say another word, the door burst open. "Lucas!" The furious voice made Emily's stomach drop. She turned just in time to see Isabella storming into the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her face was twisted in rage, her manicured fingers curling into fists. "You have some nerve," she spat, her eyes burning into Emily. "You stole my wedding, my future, my life." Emily took a step back, her heart hammering. I didn't want to save it," Isabella snapped, turning her glare to Lucas. "And you, what the hell were you thinking? How could you let this happen?" Lucas crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "I let it happen," he repeated slowly. "You're the one who didn't show up to your own wedding. I had work. You knew how important that contract was to me," Isabella hissed. "But I never told you to marry her." She jabbed a perfectly manicured finger in Emily's direction, her face twisting in disgust. Lucas's expression darkened. "Well, it's too late now," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Because she's my wife." The room went still. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Isabella's eyes widened in shock, her face paling. "No," she whispered. "No, you can't be serious." But Lucas didn't waver. His gaze was locked onto Emily, steady and firm. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "I don't want you, Isabella. I choose her." Isabella let out a strangled laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. "This isn't happening. You're mine, Lucas. You've always been mine." "Not anymore," he said. Emily could barely process what was happening. Her entire body was frozen, her mind racing. Isabella's eyes flickered between them, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence left in her wake was deafening. Emily turned to Lucas, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you say that?" Lucas's gaze didn't waver. He took a slow step closer, his voice steady. "Because I meant it. A love that defied all odds. Emily's heart pounded as Lucas's words hung in the air. Because I meant it. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. The man who was supposed to marry her twin sister had just chosen her instead. But why? Was it out of pity? Was it revenge against Isabella? Or was there something real between them? Lucas took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. I know this wasn't how things were supposed to happen, he said quietly. But I don't regret it. Emily swallowed, struggling to find her voice. Lucas, you don't have to do this just because you feel sorry for me. His jaw clenched. You think this is about pity? Emily hesitated. Isn't it? Lucas let out a sharp breath and shook his head. You don't get it, do you? He stepped even closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. From the moment I lifted that veil and saw you, I knew something was different. And when you looked at me, terrified, trapped, I recognized that feeling. Her breath caught in her throat. I know what it's like to be used, Emily, he continued. To be treated like a pawn in someone else's game. Your family did it to you. Isabella did it to me. And when I saw you standing there, I realized, I didn't want her. I never did. Emily's mind spun. But she's beautiful, successful, everything a man like you could ever want. Lucas reached out, gently tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She's everything the world expects me to want. You're everything I never knew I needed. Tears stung Emily's eyes. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But the years of rejection, the scars, both visible and hidden, had made it impossible for her to trust in fairy tales. I don't know how to be what you need, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Lucas's fingers grazed her cheek, tracing the faint outline of the scar that had defined her life for so long. You already are. Before she could overthink, before doubt could creep in, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't like the kiss at the wedding, the one meant for show, the one that had stunned the crowd. This was different. This was real. Emily melted against him, the world fading away. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't ashamed. She was simply wanted. When they finally broke apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. We'll figure this out together. No more pretending. No more running. Emily exhaled shakily, then nodded. Okay. And just like that, her life changed forever. The girl who was never meant to be the bride, had just become the love of his life. We want to hear from you. What would you do if you were in Emily's shoes? Would you have gone through with the wedding, or would you have run away? And most importantly, do you believe that love can come from unexpected places? Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We love seeing how far our stories travel and connecting with all of you. Your thoughts, opinions, and insights make this community even stronger. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another one. Tomorrow, we have an even more thrilling story waiting for you, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Comment below, share your thoughts, and let's talk. Do you think Emily and Lucas are meant to be? What do you think will happen next in their journey? Your opinions matter, and we can't wait to read them. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. See you in the next story.